Bonsoir, and welcome to all those joining us for the Ontario College of Teachers 2021 Virtual Annual Meeting of Members. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à l'Assemblée annuelle des membres.
Welcome to our annual meeting of members of the Ontario College, Teachers College.
Items. You'll note that for this meeting, you will not be using your microphone or camera. If you would like to submit a question, please send it to the email outreach@oct.ca. That's outreach@oct.ca. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais passer en revue quelques détails administratifs. Vous noterez que
Before we start, here is some housekeeping information. You have no microphone and no camera. If you have any questions, you can send them to www.oct.ca. You can send them to outreach@oct.ca.
Translation. To select your language of choice, please use the drop-down arrow beside floor, which you'll find at the bottom left corner of your screen if you're joining on a computer or tablet. And for those of you joining us on your smartphone, the option will be at the very bottom of your screen. If you select floor, what you'll be hearing is the language spoken by the speaker at all times. La séance se déroulera en français et en anglais.
The present session will be in English and French. There is simultaneous interpretation, and to select the language of your choice, you can click at the bottom of the left of your screen if you are on a computer or on a tablet. If you are on a smartphone, you can find the floor button at the bottom of your screen. The meeting is recorded and will be live streamed on our website. I now give the floor to Chantal Bellil, who will be moderating the session.
On our website in the weeks to follow. So without further delay, I turn it over to our esteemed Deputy Registrar, Chantal Bellil, who will officiate today's meeting.
Ani, bonjour, Tanzi, Wache, bonsoir, and good evening. My name is Chantal Bellil, Ontario Certified Teacher and Deputy Registrar of the Ontario College of Teachers. Welcome to the College's 2021 annual meeting. I'll begin by recognizing that the College's offices stand on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I also acknowledge that the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. C'est un plaisir pour moi de vous accueillir à notre assemblée annuelle.
It's my pleasure to welcome you to our annual members meeting. This is our second meeting in virtual mode, but it's the first one to take place in the midst of our transition to a modernized, more efficient, and economically viable governance structure.
Organization will have on college operations and its governance by way of a panel discussion. We will also hear from Paul Bonifero, the government-appointed Transition Supervisory Officer, about his experience of leading us through this transition. As well, Dr. Derek Hain, Ontario Certified Teacher, our Registrar and CEO, will guide us through this year's progress on further protecting student safety and well-being, while also enhancing accountability and transparency of our activities in the public interest. Following that, I'll join Paul and Derek to facilitate a session on answering your questions. We're looking forward to hearing from you, so please email your questions to, as Stéphane pointed out earlier, outreach@oct.ca. Vous pouvez nous envoyer vos questions en français à liaison.
You can also send your questions in English to outreach@oct.ca.
Guests for a panel discussion, let me set the stage with a quick review of the college's governance changes and how you can get involved. First of all, tomorrow is the last day for those who are interested to apply online on our website at oct.ca. We're looking to fill more than 100 roles among 3 different arms of the college's governance, with members of the public and those of the profession. The increased number of roles provides greater opportunity to get involved in college governance and its adjudicative functions. For example, certain individuals will serve on a nimbler council that will ensure college policies meet the mandate of protecting Ontario students. Others may serve on a committee. Committee members perform the regulatory and the statutory work of the college, and if required, may serve on adjudicative panels. And finally, individuals could also be appointed to serve as a roster member. That means they would participate in decision-making panels on behalf of the committee. So there's still time to apply. Vous nous avez aussi entendu parler d'équilibre.
You have also heard us talk about balance. The new model provides for an equal number of members from the teaching profession and members of the public. This balance will strengthen our mandate to protect the public interest and allow us to draw on the wide range of personal and linguistic experiences of Ontarians. So we are welcoming and accepting applications from Ontario residents who are interested in any of the available positions. Applicants will be assessed and selected based on their qualifications, skills, expertise, and experience.
Implementing this new governance model, but what does it mean for Ontario students and public protection? So joining us this evening to answer that question is an expert panel who have graciously agreed to share with us their time, their expertise, and their insight. I'd like to welcome David Brown, Executive Vice President, Governance Solutions, Inc. David, I invite you to share a little bit about you, yourself, Governance Solutions, Inc.
Thanks, Chantal. Yeah, delighted to be here. I'm one of the principals of Governance Solutions. We've been working full-time with boards for the last 30 years in helping to improve governance effectiveness, including with self-regulatory organizations and professions here in Ontario and beyond. And prior to that, I worked with the financial regulator here in the province of Ontario. Thanks,
Thank
Chantal.
you. Thank you. And we've had the pleasure of working with you, and it's been very beneficial. Corinne De Bruin, Executive Director, College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia. Corinne, please also share a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Thanks, Chantal. Good evening, everyone. As Chantal has mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Registration at the College of Physicians and Surgeons in BC. I've been working in the regulatory environment for about 10 years, and I have a legal background. At our college, we've recently made some changes to our governance structure and mechanisms and anticipate more legislatively imposed changes coming this year and in 2022. I really appreciate you having me as part of this panel this evening. Thank you.
We're really pleased to have you with us. Thank you. And inviting André Gariepi. André is the Commissioner for Admission to Professions in the Government of Quebec's Office of Professions. André, je t'invite à te présenter à tous qui se joignent à nous ce soir.
Oui, bonjour, c'est un plaisir à partir du Québec.
Yes, hello, I'm in Quebec, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm André Gariepi. I'm the Commissioner for Admission to Professions in the Government of Quebec's Office of Professions. And this is the equivalent in Ontario of the another commissioner. I have been at this role for 10 years, and I am the Commissioner for the Admission to Professions. And before that, I was in a professional college. During 10 years, I was directing the Federation of Professional Colleges in the health sector, legal, science, and technological sector. So during the last 30 years, I contributed to several reforms with this debate around interest for public sector and how to make friends instead of enemies during the reforms. There has been a reform of the professional colleges in Quebec lately that created more collaboration and transparency for the public. Thank you very much, André. Indeed, this is a very actual topic.
I know for a fact, Diana, you also have a very varied background. So please share a little bit with us.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. My name is Deanna Williams, and I am currently the president of Dundee Consulting Group. I'm a pharmacist by background, and my experience in regulation is really was with the College of Pharmacists, the Ontario College of Pharmacists here in Ontario. I was with the college for 18 years, and since stepping down as its registrar and CEO, I've been doing consulting work in areas related to professional and occupational regulation in Canada and internationally. So I'm delighted to be here with you all.
Thank you to all four of you for joining us. We're really thrilled that you could be part of this discussion. So let's just jump in. My first question is going to be for David and Corinne. So David, what do these governance changes mean for the college, and how do they support the mandate of licensing, governing, and regulating Ontario's teaching profession in the public interest?
Well, thanks, Chantal. I think it's helpful for the members to have the governance modernization situated in terms of current trends. One of the things I wanted to mention is this is the result of an exhaustive process that was initiated by council, and there were substantial consultations with members and other stakeholders that resulted in a series of recommendations that council and its governance committee deliberated at length before coming to some recommendations that it put forward with regard to governance modernization. And one of the trends that we're seeing is right touch regulation. And what's meant by that is that regulatory bodies, including self-regulatory bodies like the college, are focusing on harm reduction as the focus of the purpose of governance. Why does council even exist in the first place, and the regulatory committees that Chantal mentioned? It's about protecting the public, and in the case of a teacher's college, it's about protecting students from harm. And so how do we best do that in terms of governance? We have a trend towards greater public participation, more public members in addition to members of the profession, a balance between the two, serving on council and on statutory committees and on rosters, to make sure we draw on the relative strengths of each. There's some systemic bias that can occur in any organization, gender bias, racism bias, other forms of bias that we're attempting to mitigate by having a broader mix of people and more of a competency-based selection, for example. So you're not alone. You're situated in a modernization trend that is throughout the industrialized world, right across Canada. And self-regulation is something that's a privilege, not a right. And so we want to be able to demonstrate that that's a privilege that we earn.
Thanks, David. Corinne, I think David's comments mentioning this is a global trend, and that he's talking about right touch regulation. He's talking about, more public participation. I believe this must all resonate with you. You were mentioning you're also going into a governance modernization exercise.
Yeah, definitely resonates with me. Working with an organization where we are currently undergoing these changes, and very much undergoing the changes and trends that David just mentioned. So in BC, our board and government are already on the path to making changes to our governance. So in 2020, our provincial government released a report that in part focused on approaches to modernizing governance and the health profession regulatory framework. So that report included recommendations on governance. So the report noted a number of deficiencies in how regulatory colleges in the health professions currently have their governance model. And so the recommendations that came out of that report are to have an equal number of registrant and public members, because currently right now we are very profession heavy, that board members be recommended for appointment through a competency-based process. Currently, a lot of our board members are still elected. We do have now appointments for public members. That there's appropriate training and education so that the governors can govern effectively. That regulatory college boards move to a smaller size because that's best practice for governance. Right now, currently our board had about 16, and we're shrinking that down. So ideally we're going to end up with about 12. And that board and committee members be fairly and consistently compensated, because through our health profession regulatory bodies in BC, there's quite a bit of variety. So in BC, where we are now is we now have a composition matrix for our board members. So for any recruitment that we do, we actually do an open call for our public and professional members. We recently did this for the first time. We had 120 applications for 12 positions, and it was operated very much like a recruitment for any job. Our HR department was involved. It was fair and transparent. It set out the skills that were needed. It linked to information about all the requirements for different positions. It talked about the time commitment involved, what those members would be compensated and how they would be compensated. So those are some changes that are already underway and that we've made, but we still have elections. In part, this is because our current legislation requires that. So until the government makes those changes, we can't make any additional ones. But I also anticipate that the government will be making other legislative changes. So stay tuned.
So thanks, Corinne. You name many topics such as, changes to the legislation that are required that include like smaller size on boards. You're looking at the composition of boards. So as a follow-up to what David and Corinne have shared, I'm going to turn to Deanna. And I'm going to come back to you, Corinne, as well for a follow-up. But Deanna, what challenges arise then when implementing changes to regulatory governance? And in your opinion, how do you balance involvement with a reform initiative versus opposition to the initiative?
Yes. Well, thank you. That's a very, very interesting questions. In my experience, I think that implementing significant changes can be challenging, and you always have people who really embrace change and seek change, but there are many who don't. And I think particularly when you're making changes where someone perceives that a change could result in a loss, for example, of control or of influence, those changes can be particularly difficult to make. I think the significant shift that the College of Teachers is making from an elected model where teachers have elected their representatives, if you will, onto council to a model where everyone will be appointed, whether you're a teacher or a public member, based on some demonstrated competencies and skills. I think it aligns with best practices internationally, and David talked about that, but I think it could still be challenging. And so one way I would think that we could try and balance that is to look at that privilege that David talked about. The self-regulation that we have in Canada is such a privilege. It can be lost, and it has been lost. It was lost with teachers in British Columbia. It was lost with denturists here in Ontario. And I think if you look at the change from the sense that we want to preserve the privilege we have, and we want to help assure, in the public's view anyway, that professions and the profession of teaching in particular can be trusted to self-regulate and to regulate itself. And I think if you look at it through that lens, then the change becomes worth embracing.
Thanks, Corinne. So a lot of the comments made by Deanna about the challenges and then that balance of, the opposition versus the participation resonating with you and what you're going through in BC?
Absolutely. I think the change management piece is key, and Deanna pointed that out at the onset. Sometimes it's difficult to get buy-in from the members of the board. One thing we found in BC and with the college that I work with is that we had a governance working committee, which was a committee of the board, and it was a smaller group that really worked on reviewing governance recommendations, best practices, and then coming back to the larger board at meetings and providing reports. And that really seemed to work well for our board to move our governance review forward and come up with recommendations. I think it can also be seen as what Deanna talks about, an opportunity to shape your own future, or it will be shaped for you. Make changes or it will be imposed. So the example Deanna gave is the teachers in BC. We also have the same thing with the real estate regulatory body here.
Right.
And I think that one thing that's a challenge is that board members need to really appreciate that they're not there representing anyone or a constituency, a region, or a type of practice, that they're really there to represent the public interest. And that may not always align with their own views.
So thank you for that. And we've spoken, many of you have already addressed or brought up the topic about the board composition, number of board members. So Corinne and David, I'm going to turn to you. I'm sure people are curious about the new equal balance between the public and profession on our council and committees that the college is entering into. So this move, from my understanding, is not a current norm, but yet it's a shift. We're moving in that direction, as some of you have pointed out already. So how significant is this change in your opinion, and how will the college maintain the self-regulation when the profession does not represent a majority on council and committee? And this is a recurring question we get. Corinne, on that point, and then I'll turn to David.
Yeah, I would say that it's a recurring question that our board has too, and has many conversations about. And one of the ways that it can work, and what we've talked about with our board, is to have advisory or working committees that are made up of professionals, that when you need the expertise as a board, you get it from those advisory or working committees. And also to have those other committees have those professions so they can provide the input. We also think that the other important component is having policies on governance for the board. And I think that really hones in on the role of the board and helps support those changes.
David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a couple more things that I think I could add to what Corinne's saying. I mean, one of the things is when you think about it, we're really talking about broadening out the level of engagement with members of the profession. The members of the profession currently, a very small number of people are actively involved in electing council members, and a very small number are engaged in serving on statutory committees. As Chantal said, we're just finishing up a broad posting for both members of the profession and public to serve on council, on statutory committees, and on roster panels. And so we're going to have members of the profession playing a larger role and being matched up better with where they fit and where they add value. And I guess the other thing I would say is I wouldn't exaggerate the importance of plurality when it comes to majority. That's not really how governing bodies make decisions. They make decisions by consensus. And so, you know, whether it's 50-50 on council or 60-40 or 70-30, at the end of the day, every council member's voice is listened to, is heard. They all have the opportunity to persuade one another, and they generally make decisions by consensus moving forward. So I see this as a win for self-regulation, not a loss at all.
Thank you for those comments. We're talking a lot about the board and structure. So my next question is going to touch on organizational stability during this change. So perhaps I'm going to turn to André and David, and they can weigh in here. So David, we'll start with you. What structures or mechanisms help a regulatory body efficiently meet its mandated obligations during transition, as well as going forward under the new model, the new governance model?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chantal. Well, I think one of the big clarities, I guess, would bring it is a differentiation between the sort of corporate governance and the regulatory governance side of the college. The council, a smaller council, more nimble, if you will, focusing on the governance of the college as a whole, and then the regulatory statutory committees independent from council, independently composed, independently functioning, able to think and act autonomously, whether it's regard to standards or complaints or discipline, having a delegation of authority and functioning in that quasi-judicial role. And a second aspect of the governance modernization is as council as a whole elevates itself to a governing level, there's a delegation of day-to-day operations to the registrar and the professional staff. And so this delegation will involve a more effective and efficient and productive use and a matching of people's skills and talents in the right place. So this structure of a segregation of roles and a delegation of authority with the appropriate transparency and accountability are all intended to give you a much more robust structure.
Thank you. André, David mentionne la gouvernance corporative.
So André, David is talking about the corporate governance and the other type of governance. What structures help a regulatory body efficiently meet its mandated obligations during transition, as well as going forward under a new governance model? So David talked about the things we really have to distinguish in a college like this, but I think that there's always a risk of misunderstanding of the reform in this transition. We always have to keep in mind our goals. So, as David mentions, we have structure, which are important. In Quebec, it is important to have some support so that we are sure that the reforms are well understood and that we keep the direction we started so that things happen the way they were intended at the end of the transition, so that the culture at the end is well understood and so that the institution can follow up and reach its goals.
Andre is speaking to ensure effective transition. He's also speaking to clear direction. So those are points I think that resonate with all of us and have been addressed as we discuss this topic. So for a follow-up question, so the college continuously states it's committed to transparency. I mean, I can vouch for that. I know a lot of our SLT members, we're constantly referencing transparency. I'm again going to turn to Andre and also invite Deanna for your thoughts. So Deanna, how do you maintain transparency and mitigate stakeholder concerns during a transition process like this one?
Well, thank you. I really do see that embracing transparency and openness as much as possible through a change or a transition process as important in helping to build trust and also to demonstrate accountability. So I think it's really, really important. And when you think about what stakeholders really want, I think they really want to be consulted on things that impact them. And they want to know, what changes or transition is being proposed or implemented and what's the rationale for that. So I think that's very important. There's lots of technology. I think the good news is there's lots of technology available to us today to allow us to, whether we can use to reach stakeholders, because not only to consult on things, but also to keep stakeholders apprised on updates, how things are going, progress, what's on track, what's not on track, and if something's going to change, what that is. And I guess the last thing I'd say is that stakeholder feedback is critical to any successful process, and it's very, very important. But it doesn't always and can't always change, stop, or redirect the proposals that you're consulting on. So I think it's really important just for successful processes that everyone is clear and the expectations are clear to everybody across the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Deanna. Alors, André, Deanna mentionne des mécanismes.
So Deanna is talking about consulting the stakeholders, keeping people informed, and having feedback. So according to you, do you have some thoughts on how to maintain transparency and mitigate stakeholders' concerns during transition? Yes, for sure. Transparency and appease stakeholders because this is also reality. Sometimes people are very worried about symbolic things. They don't really understand the complexity, but they see the transition as a symbol and so this relationship between the college and the public is a symbol, but it can be simple. So they have to be informed. So we have to inform them about the goals and avoid misunderstandings, and we have to show what the reality is. Yes, so that people don't stay stuck in their worries and preoccupations that sometimes are not justified. And if people are still worried, it is important for the leaders who are implementing the reform to take those preoccupations into account in order to be able to adapt. So communication is key. It is a key to for the evolution of the reform, but also to ensure that all stakeholders are being heard and are taken into account, and so that the reform is explained as it should.
Address concerns that stakeholders may have were also, and it's been mentioned before by the panelists, about engagement. So a question about regulators have historically experienced low engagement in the election of licensees to the governing council, thus speaking a bit to why we've adopted and going to an appointed model. So Deanne, I'm going to turn to you, and then I will also seek David's thoughts on this. What are the advantages, in your opinion, and disadvantages in moving from the election-based council to a council of selection based on competency?
Well, thank you. If it's all right, I think I'd like to focus on some of the advantages, because I actually see those are the ones that are most dear to my heart. But I do think that the key advantage is that a move away from an elections model, I think, will go far in eliminating some of the challenges we see because of the confusion that it causes. And I say that because and, you know, in pharmacy, we've been regulated 150 years, and we still get that confusion on our board, where pharmacists are elected onto our councils by their constituents or their peers. And then as soon as they get on council, they're told that you're not there to represent those who put you on council. You're there to actually represent and serve the interests of the public. And it does cause confusion. And it does sometimes, I think, challenge good governance. So I think it's a real advantage from that standpoint. And the other is it does really with best governance practices, not just in the regulatory world, but across jurisdictions and across professions. And I think that with respect to the historically sort of small engagement or numbers, in my experience, the jurisdictions and professions who actually have taken steps, and Corinne mentioned this about having 120 applicants for a very small number of seats. They actually are seeing more people apply because from a wider and more diverse group, I think, because they think maybe they'd have a chance of contributing to the governance on council, where they may not be successful in an election, but if it was based on competencies or skills that they bring forward, that they actually might have an opportunity. So I think that it's got a lot of advantages.
Thank you. David, any additional thoughts on this question?
Oh, I guess I have a couple. I mean, one is that we've worked with a lot of clients over the years in migrating to a more competency-based selection, including professional associations and cooperatives and mutuals. And there's a couple of lessons that we've learned along the way. One is a real risk, I guess I would call it a risk, is the perception among members of being disenfranchised when you move away. And so the way you mitigate that risk is the new process of selection that you adopt. It's got to be robust. It's got to be transparent. Everybody's got to be able to see how it works. It's got to be accountable so that the members don't feel disenfranchised, that in fact you're engaging a greater group of members. That's one thing. The other thing I would say is sometimes we use this word competency as short form, and it's a bit of a lightning rod because people think it means your experience and education alone. And when we talk about competencies, we're talking about much broader attributes than that. We're talking about diversity of gender and ethnicity and age and backgrounds and different ways of thinking and geographic and faith-based, and as many different dimensions of diversity as you can think of. And we're talking about character attributes and being able to work on teams and being a good listener. And so it's not just these narrow competency. When we talk about adopting more competency-based selection, we're talking about a strategy to be more diverse and to have people of good character, and ultimately to have the right people on the right committees and on council to serve the public and to serve the profession as well. It should be a win-win.
So we speak of and have mentioned the opportunity this brings for the diversity, engagement, and I appreciate David's comment on being mindful of the sense of disenfranchisement of the profession and members of the profession. So we certainly have noticed more engagement in the process, so to speak, on what we're going through right now. As I mentioned earlier, that the opportunity to apply is still available to individuals until tomorrow. So it's definitely so far in this early stage demonstrating that it has provided opportunities for more members to demonstrate their interest. So thank you for those comments. I'm going to turn to a question relating to, as we're talking about the governing board and individuals appointed to boards. So for many of our appointees, this will be their first time working in regulatory governance. So André, I'm going to ask you to comment, and then I'll also turn to Corinne for her comments. Mais André, comment peut-on s'assurer que les membres du conseil et des
Donc André, following on Corinne's comments, how do you see as the benefits? How can we be sure, that the people have the skills that are necessary? Yes, so David talked about the selection process, which is very important. But to activate all those skills through knowledge or training, different groups have to be represented in Quebec. We try to have representatives from First Nations and youth under 35 years old. So it's not only the most experimented who are members of the boards, but we also want to represent the cultural diversity. And having young professional present on the board. But to benefit from the presence of those people who represent the public, it is very important to train them correctly. They have to be trained for the institutional reality and the legal reality and the type of responsibilities that they will have to do, because all the beautiful general wisdom that the public members give us and the expertise that the professional members bring us have to be harmonized. So these members of the public have to be trained so that they know how they can best serve their mandate. So the experience we have in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada, our goal is to train those people. And this has been set in the law. We have recommendations regarding governance, and we have training, special training for those people so that they can assume leadership roles, but also that they know about ethics and best practices. So training is paramount. It is very important, but it is also important to gather those people so that they can exchange and so outside the formal context, to also gather public representatives in order to discuss with them and know what their experience is, and so that they can share their experience, so that we can have that new culture evolve and a new governance model. Thank you.
Relevant training for these appointees, gathering the individuals for there to be shared learning. So on how would your thoughts on how we ensure council and committee members have the knowledge, skills, and experience required to make decisions that support public interest?
Yeah, thanks, Chantal. Well, here in BC, we'd like to throw them in the deep end. No, I'm kidding. When board members are first appointed to the board, what occurs is they go through an orientation for all the relevant areas of our organization. And one of the things that's been a real positive out of the pandemic is we never did these by webinar before, but now we do them by webinar. We have it recorded and it's there to use again. So that's been a real gift of the pandemic because it's really taught us that we can do that in a different way. So that just gives new board members an orientation to all the aspects. During actual board meetings, we do education sessions as well about different areas, because obviously if you're not in it, it's difficult to keep that understanding. Over and above that, we have a chair school that we send. Well, we don't have the chair school, but we send board chairs and committee chairs to what we call chair schools. So they learn how to chair the board and what is a governance function and what isn't a governance function. We have training on unconscious bias, on governance in general, and the role of the board. And in the last few years, we've also had additional training on cultural safety and humility, trauma-informed approaches, which is really important for a number of aspects of our work, and also administrative law. And those continually are offered because there are changes in all those areas. So it's really important for us to keep current. And so we've really also found that having someone from outside of the organization to provide that training is really helpful, and it gets the buy-in.
Yes, and so not to throw Deanna off, but because there's been great suggestions shared. But Deanna, I'm going to guess you might have a couple of nuggets or some other thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would just really concur with what my colleagues have said, because I think that they're right on. I think the fact is that there are higher expectations that are put on members of regulatory boards or councils today than ever before. I mean, regulators were very much under scrutiny. We're under microscopes now. We're no longer able to skate under the radar. So I think that it's really, really key that people who come on to our councils and in fact committees really understand what those expectations are, and that we help them as regulators get the skills and education and induction training, as we've just heard, to help them be successful at meeting those expectations. So I think that that's really important. And I think my colleagues have already said, you know, induction at the front end, ongoing education and training for the whole time someone's on.
Thank you very much for those comments. So interestingly, we're going to arrive at our last question. I'm going to turn to Corinne and André for this one. Corinne, in your opinion, what are the advantages of the college's governance changes for licensees and the profession as a whole?
Yeah, I think that the governance changes that we're undergoing and that you're undergoing, they serve the public interest and the interest of the profession overall. And that's really our mandate, whether it's teachers or physicians, it is to serve the public interest. The impartiality and transparency of regulation is increased, which I think is a positive. It supports the legitimacy of regulation. Regulation becomes competency-based and not self-interest based, and I think that's really critical. And that will result in increased support from current professionals, no matter what profession we're regulating.
Thanks. Et André, à toi, suite au commentaire de Corinne,
According to you, what are the advantages for the governance of the order, not only for the teachers, but also for the profession in general? I don't think you have to follow a trend. You must take upon yourself the interest of the latest model in order to make the most of it. I think that the changes that are brought to the governance in Ontario to the teachers, it's as if you're integrating in your organization discussions that are already ongoing, and they are needed. You have to see how we have to dose the specificity of the profession versus the common sense, the wisdom, the democratic wisdom. So this way you can include into your professional order the public, members of the public. And so instead of managing some sort of crisis because you didn't see it coming, well, you have in front of you internally some people that will help you understand how things can be perceived from the outside. So for you, it's a way to always be aware. It's a way to have policies, rules, and expectations for teachers in Ontario. And you know that they are there to meet the needs of the public. Education has a particular status. You live it in your schools. I was president of a school board for 8 years, and I've seen what partnership teachers are part of the answer, but also parents. They're legitimate and also members of the public, and we are. Even teachers are members of the public if you think about it. So when you have this mix of perspective, sometimes you have some decisions that are made, and these decisions are more in following the current trends of society, and that is very important. Professional orders have bad press because we think that things are kind of hidden, and we think that, you know, when you open yourself, because you're public, you're dealing with the public, when you're always integrating the vision of the public, then you're giving a guarantee from the institution that the public interest is always taken into consideration. So this is a way of avoiding problems, and also managing some of the criticism that may come from the media, government, the economic sector. So for me, this is a plus for the credibility of the profession. So I wish you luck, and I think it will be great. I don't know if it's possible, but you can also give us, you can tell us more. Do you have anything to add? Do you have anything to add to conclude tonight's topic? I think I just said it, actually. I don't have anything to add. I don't have anything to add, but I can tell you that I have been on both sides. If there are two sides, I was in a professional order. I represented all the professional orders in Quebec. There are 46 of them. And now I'm on the other side, on from the government side, and I'm watching them. I can see what is going on. I can see what the criticism is. I hear everything, and I can tell you what you're doing will appease, and this takes nothing away from you. This will give you actually even more legitimacy. You bring your expertise as a specialist from the education system. You were able to take into consideration every actors in society. Teachers are also citizens, and they have to be a partner. You have great words, and I think that you have said it well.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you for participating in this panel discussion. I hope it's motivated some individuals, some viewers to go to our website and to put forward their names for the application for the governance and the committee to participate in this new structure. So I thank you all and have a great evening. I'd like to take this opportunity just to remind everyone that they can email their questions for tonight's Q&A to outreach@oct.ca. Je tiens à vous rappeler que nous répondons à vos questions un peu plus tard.
We're going to answer your questions a little bit later. Do not hesitate to write an email at liaison@oeeo.ca.
I'm happy to introduce Transition Supervisory Officer Paul Boniferro for an update on some of the new policies and regulations that will support the college's new governance structure. So Paul, over to you.
Merci Chantal, bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening tonight. It's trite for me to say it, but both 2020 and 2021 have been trying on teachers and on parents. Teachers have had to pivot to ensure their classrooms ran seamlessly when COVID-19 forced the province to transition to a virtual learning environment. Meanwhile, parents had to juggle multiple roles to help their children navigate online classrooms, while at times also putting their IT help desk hats on. The recent start of the school year also has you navigating different models of schooling, be it in person with enhanced safety protocols, hybrid learning, or a return to virtual. I understand it is a constant juggle, which is why I think it's important for me tonight to start by saying thank you. Thank you for continuing to do what you do. Thank you for your adaptability, your resilience, your dedication, and your commitment. Thank you for helping to ensure the education needs of Ontario students continue to be met during this time of uncertainty. Simply put, I say, merci, thank you. So as some of you know, my name is Paul Bonifero, and I'm the college's Transition Supervisory Officer, or TSO for short. My title is both accurate and descriptive because I'm here to oversee and help the college move to a newly modernized governance structure that was just discussed by our previous panel. Late last year, the government passed Bill 229, which included long-awaited recommendations from council to modernize the college's governing body while strengthening student protections for Ontario's more than 2 million students. These recommendations included the dissolution of an old governance structure, which happened earlier this year, and evolving to one that is more nimble, more effective, and hopefully more efficient. It is also in line with what we heard is going on globally, where we are seeing greater focus on achieving balance of public and professional representation. As you heard from Chantal, the recruitment process for this new government structure has been underway for the last 6 weeks and will remain open until the end of day tomorrow, September the 30th. I ask you to please consider applying to govern Ontario's teaching profession, your profession. Why? Well, if you're on this call now, it's because you care deeply about Ontario's education system. You care about student safety and well-being. It's also an opportunity for Ontario certified teachers and Ontarians to make decisions that will have an impact on public education. An opportunity to use and grow your professional experience in regulation and education, and an opportunity to work with other professionals who also care about education. For the first time in the college's 25-year history, there will be an equal number of licensed educators and members of the public on council and on statutory and regulatory committees. Council and committee members will be appointed, as you heard, based on a specified selection and eligibility criteria needed to do the job and reflecting geographic, linguistic, Indigenous, and diverse perspectives of Ontario. This helps to ensure those on council and committees, those in council and committee roles rather, have the appropriate skills and competencies to do the job. What remains the same is that teachers will continue to have a say in the regulation of their profession. If you haven't considered applying, there's still time to do so before the application window closes tomorrow evening, and I'd encourage you to do so. Successful applicants will be notified hopefully by December the 1st, 2021, and the new structure will come into effect on January 2nd, 2022. But the college's transition hasn't focused solely on governance. In the last year, we have also strengthened student protections. In late 2020, stronger regulations against acts of hatred came into force, further enabling the college to eliminate racism and other discriminatory actions in education. The regulations also provided the college with stronger penalties and broader definitions for acts of professional misconduct related to sexual abuse and child pornography. The government amendments also made it possible for the college to order mandatory medical assessments and keep all discipline decisions public. And these changes are only the beginning. The teaching profession has always been guided by the ethical standards of care, trust, respect, and integrity. They can be found in the daily practice and in how you, teachers, conduct yourselves both in and out of the classroom. These standards also drive the lifelong learning the teaching profession is known for. This time next year, the college will have fully transitioned to the new governance structure, and as a profession, teachers will have had an opportunity to grow their knowledge through new resources that are being developed to inform their practice. Thank you for your attention this evening, and I'd now like to turn everyone's attention to the college's Registrar and CEO, Dr. Derek Haim, OCT, who will provide insight into the college's operations. Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Paul, for that thorough review of a very busy year. I also give heartfelt thanks to all OCTs who once again stepped up to tackle the many challenges of another turbulent year. Your professionalism and dedication ensured that the students of Ontario could continue to focus on learning, even as they faced many challenges themselves. It is an honor, my honor and privilege, to be joining you at my first annual meeting of members as Registrar and CEO of the Ontario College of Teachers. And I'm sure you've picked up on tonight's theme that this is an exciting year of modernization for the college. I want to thank Paul for his steadfast leadership throughout our transition to an efficient and streamlined model that will set a new standard for regulated professions in Ontario. It's really hard to believe that when I was first appointed to the role, this evolution had not even begun. And now we are only weeks away from forming the first council that will lead us into a new era of regulatory leadership. As the college navigates this transitional year, we have not lost sight of what matters most, protecting the interests, safety, and well-being of every student in Ontario's publicly funded school system. That commitment is anchored in licensing qualified teachers and providing them with tools and resources to help ensure every learning space is inclusive of the diverse lived experiences of all students. You will soon have access to two new resources that I'm particularly proud of. The first of these explores the rich cultures and histories of Canada's Indigenous peoples and how you can incorporate these learnings into your own practice. You can learn more about this resource in a free webinar we are hosting with the Honorable Murray Sinclair on November 2nd. I hope you are all able to join us. The second is a set of AQ or additional qualification guidelines and a related professional advisory on the roots of systemic anti-Black racism, how it impacts your students to this day, and how educators can use their unique position of trust to help dismantle it. Each of these are being developed in close consultation with leaders of their respective communities, so we can ensure they best reflect the varied perspectives found in them. We have also developed and updated professional advisories to support you in maintaining professional boundaries with your students, whether that's inside the classroom, outside school grounds, or even online. These new and refreshed professional advisories help provide the foundation for one of this year's important initiatives, a new sexual abuse prevention program that launches on January 1st. Legislated by the Government of Ontario and developed in partnership with the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, this mandatory online program will include expert research to equip OCTs, including me, with an updated understanding of how healthy professional relationships with students are developed and strengthened. We will also hear directly from adult survivors of childhood abuse, whose powerful words will underline the importance of the unique position of trust that teachers are in. Healthy professional relationships not only help prevent abuse, they provide at-risk students with the security they need to disclose their situation to a trusted and supportive adult. The continued professionalism of Ontario certified teachers ensures that such cases are exceedingly rare. But we all know that one case is too many. Resources such as our professional advisories and the sexual abuse prevention program when taken together, go a long way toward taking the number of cases closer to zero. When these and other cases of professional misconduct are alleged, we are committed to conducting fair and thorough investigations of the facts, and where those facts require, open and transparent disciplinary hearings. We have invested considerable effort into speeding up that process, including the introduction of an undertaking to resign and never reapply program. In appropriate cases, this program bypasses the hearing process to more quickly remove individuals who should not be teaching from the classroom. That protects students and strengthens the profession. Finally, I want to acknowledge the service delays that have been affecting college operations, including response times to phone calls and emails. I apologize unreservedly for the frustration and inconvenience this has caused for members and applicants. And I want to personally thank you for your patience as our teams work diligently to respond to all inquiries. I want to assure you that we are committed to ensuring that all causes of these delays are addressed as quickly as possible. To that end, the college has commissioned external consultants to conduct an in-depth internal review of our membership services department, focusing on the operations, accompanying policies, practices, and procedures. Findings from the review will be available later this fall, and we are prepared to act immediately on its relevant recommendations. I will close with another round of thank yous. Thank you for your continued dedication to students and your adaptability in difficult circumstances. We should all be proud to represent this profession. It's a profession that is strengthened when we put students first, and it is my commitment to you that I will always do exactly that. Thank you for your time. I'd like to welcome back Paul and Chantal for our live Q&A. Please submit questions in English and questions in French to liaison@oeeo.ca.
So thank you, Derek. We appreciate your leadership in putting the interests and well-beings of students first and foremost. I also want to thank everyone for submitting your questions this evening. We'll answer as many as we can during the time we have left together. Answers to questions we are unable to get to will be posted on our website. So I'm going to turn the first question to Paul. And actually, Paul, it's more of an inquisitive statement. So the member states, I hope that we will participate in SRI, so my take socially responsible investing, and ESG, environmental and social governance strategic investments in the future. So Paul, I invite you to comment on that.
So all of the investment decisions at the college are typically made by council. In this peculiar year, there is no council, and so those decisions are made by me with the assistance of staff. I think it's important to point out that most of the college's revenues that we receive from membership fees go to fund the operations that fulfill our mandate. But there is a small GIC investment portfolio that is managed by staff at the college, and details of that is released each year to the members through the annual report. And I can assure you that in this peculiar year, where it's just me and no other council members, that I have been asking staff tough and difficult questions around investments to make sure that the members understand what the investments are and that they're being dealt with in the SRI and the ESG investment concepts as well. So an excellent question, and I can assure you that this year it's been taken care of, and I'm confident that the new council that we select will also look at it in the same light that I have.
And I can also verify Paul has been asking those tough questions as I oversee the finance portfolio. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn this over to Derek. The next question goes to you. How does the OCT fulfill its obligations towards truth and reconciliation outlined by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
Thank you. The college's commitment to diversity and inclusion includes an Indigenous lens. We continually work with Indigenous groups and licensees to develop multiple resources that will help OCTs and accredited faculties incorporate Indigenous culture and ways of knowing into their practice and programs. These resources include additional qualifications guidelines focused on Indigenous languages, culture, histories, and traditional teachings. The college recognizes there is always more work to be done and supports the implementation of the Truth and Reconciliation Report's 94 calls to action. New resources to further support teachers who wish to incorporate Indigenous history and teachings into their practice are currently being developed. I invite all to register for two-part webinars which will be held in November. The first one is taking place November 2nd with the Honorable Murray Sinclair, to be followed by part 2 on November 29th, to be headlined by personnel from our Standards of Practice unit.
Thanks, Derek. I know that a lot of our staff are also looking forward to that very insightful webinar. So, Paul, I'm going to turn to you with a question that we received ahead of tonight's meeting. So members are always interested in our operational costs. This question speaks to the financial impact of moving the college to a new governance structure. So the question is, how will this impact the annual membership fees for teachers, as it seems to be continuously increasing?
Excellent question. And so typically the council, college council each year, which eventually in January of next year will be public appointees and members, considers a budget that's presented by staff for review, and they approve that budget. Those approval processes are to look at things like operational needs and also just prudent, responsible financial planning and governance. And so in the absence of the council this year, again, I will be approving the proposed 2022 budget. That hasn't yet been presented to me, but it will be shortly. And good news is I can assure members that I understand that the proposed budget this year will maintain the annual membership fee at $170 per member.
Thank you, Paul. So Derek, over to you with the question that staff tells me has come a few times tonight from our viewers, and I think we all anticipated this question would come. So what specific action is the college taking to address extensive delays in member certification? I know you spoke a little bit about it earlier, but let's reiterate now because we've received the question.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent question. We are very sorry for the delays. Earlier this year, the college hired an external consultant to review, evaluate, and make recommendations to the college's applicant and membership services process. The report is currently underway.
Thank you, Derek. So I'm going to stay with you, Derek, for a next question. When will findings of the report, the internal review of the Membership Services Department report, be available for the public to be made aware of?
As mentioned, the report is underway and will be made publicly available later this fall. Changes and improvements to our processes will be made based on the findings in the report.
Thank you again for confirming that. So we have two additional questions that were sent ahead of this evening. So Derek, the question, how extensive is the anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism elimination mandate, and how will related efforts within the teaching profession be broadly communicated and enforced by the college?
Thank you, and leave it to teachers for the excellent questioning. I really appreciate this. The college has zero tolerance for hateful and discriminatory behavior of any kind. Under the Ontario College of Teachers Act, anti-Black and anti-Indigenous behavior is considered an act of professional misconduct and grounds for discipline. More information is available at oct.ca. The college shares this information a number of ways, including through our official publication, our newsletters online, and on social media. The history and consequences of systemic racism continue to have negative impacts on students of color. The college is currently developing additional qualifications guidelines and professional advisories that will help educators better understand those impacts and how they can mitigate them in learning spaces.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Paul on the same theme, Paul. This next question asks about anti-racism in the modernized governance structure. So how is it anti-racist? How does it center anti-oppression? How does it center the voices of historically marginalized teachers, students, communities? How will you increase representation of racialized Black and Indigenous members on committees and rosters?
Well, tough question, but a good one and an important one. First and foremost, let me assure people that it will be my intention, and I'll work with Derek and the team and others, the outside providers that are assisting us in the selection process. It will be my objective to ensure that the new council reflects Ontario and its diversity, its Indigenous people, its visible minorities, and its linguistic diversity. Our outreach, our communications and outreach has been very broad and has gone out across the province. I'm thrilled at the response that we have received. Derek can probably give you a more accurate number, but it's well close to, or maybe over 1,000 people that are applying for these roles. And I'm confident that we can find people that have the competencies and skill sets that are required, but also reflect the face of Ontario and the face of our membership. And so it is my goal as we do the appointment, and I will only have a role in the first appointed council under this new model. It will be my goal that those members, both teachers and public members, reflect Ontario's diversity.
Thank you.
Paul, I'm happy to update. We're closer to 2,000 who have begun the application process. So we're very pleased.
That's great. Thank you to both for responding to that question. So over to you, Derek. We have a question that asks, what is the math test? So I assume the math proficiency test. Why is the math test so important?
Successful completion of a math proficiency test is a provincially legislated requirement. All new and returning applicants must complete the test to be considered eligible for certification by the college.
And another question for Derek. How will school boards, schools, and classrooms honor the land each day?
Land acknowledgements in classrooms and other school facilities fall under the responsibilities of local school boards. Please reach out to your local school board for more information.
Thank you. I'm still staying with you, Derek. Are we ever going to take climate change seriously in the curriculum?
Ontario's curriculum falls outside the college's mandate. Please contact the Ministry of Education to share your concerns.
So to you both, we have a couple of questions coming in through the chat. So I'm going to ask you both, you could look at that. I'm going to ask another question to Paul, and then you may want to look at your chats to see if we have a few, because we seem to have a little more time for questions. So Paul, I'm going to direct this question to you. How are the changes in the college's governance going to be communicated and evaluated over the next 5 years?
So as was mentioned by the panel, the new governance structure will for the first time be equally balanced between members of the public and those in the profession. I can assure you that it will also be more efficient and more cost effective. You heard numbers from our friend from the BC medical profession talk about going from, I think she said 18 members down to 12. At the college, we had, I believe, 37 members in the college, in the council that was dissolved in February. And we're looking at somewhere between 12 and 18 members as well. So just there in and of itself, the new model will be more cost efficient and effective. The college will continue to provide updates to its members through publications, newsletters, and through social media. And so members are encouraged to look at that and to respond and to question it. And then, I think it's important to also point out that the college's strategic priorities include strengthening transparency and accountability. And you mentioned that in your opening remarks, Chantal, and improving stakeholder engagement, which Derek has commented on. And I think given those two priorities, we'll continue to listen carefully to our members through those who join the council and the rosters and the committees. while publicly communicating how that feedback is incorporated to enhance our operations. So it'll be a sort of ongoing, fluid, living feedback document, but coming from various modes. I think, I'll end on this note. Remember that the whole goal here is to focus back onto our main mission of protecting the student and public interest. And I think a smaller, more efficient, effective council will be able to do that.
Thank you, Paul. So we're going to try and take a few questions from the chat, understanding that many questions are repeating themselves. So we're just trying to filter through quickly. So bear with us, folks. We appreciate your patience as we try and respond to some of these questions. So this is more operational for Derek and I. We can try and respond to this one. What happens if a member stays out of the province or the country for more than 2 years? Does their absence from active teaching duties impact their membership with the college? So I'm not sure, Derek, would you like me to respond? Do you want to respond in that regard?
Go ahead, Chantal. This is a lot
Okay.
of fun, so I want you to have a part in it too.
Okay, so let's see here. In terms of the college's work, including certification and information collection, we infuse the concepts of equity, inclusivity, anti-oppression, self-reflection, diversity, and public voice. So the college continues to seek ways to enhance transparency and accountability, publicly sharing demographic data. So I think I'm responding to the wrong question. Sorry about that. I just need to see. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong response there. So in terms of certification, if you're staying outside of the province, from my understanding, and we'll have all these responses on our website, but you simply have to reactivate your membership status by paying the membership reinstatement fee. So it's not an issue if you've been outside, inactive, out of the province or whatnot. At the college, it's simply paying a reinstatement fee. And any, let's say, any new obligations that have come to light, such as math proficiency or whatnot, you might have those obligations as well to remain current. And then the next one that I'd started responding to, here's the question before the response. How are you going to be transparent in terms of equity and inclusion? How will you share demographic data about who is accepted into the college? This is important because it shows the public you're committed to equity and inclusion. It also holds you accountable, ensuring that diversity of students identifies it's represented in who teaches them.
Thanks, Chantal. Transparency is very important in every aspect of the college's work, including certification and information collection, is infused with the concepts of equity, inclusivity, anti-oppression, self-reflection, diversity, and public voice. The college continually seeks new ways to enhance transparency and accountability, and we always appreciate the input we get from both members and members of the public. Publicly sharing demographic data of licensees and governance members is among our considerations and is always handled with care and discretion to respect privacy. In addition, college operations and staffing are subject to review by the Ontario Fairness Commissioner.
Thank you, Derek. And I can provide staff assisted me in providing a few little more nuggets of information relating to the question I responded to relating to certification. And just for some additional detail, teacher candidates receive an application number when they submit their online applications from the college. So once certified, that number becomes their registration number. And the standards of practice and ethics are bedrock principles for the teaching profession. So the college continuously committed to providing ongoing professional development opportunities to all OCTs. And your licensing number is the one you would use to continue to pay your annual fees and reinstate your application. So I think those are the questions we've been able to collate for this evening. However, I want to reiterate, all questions will be responded to and available on our website. This won't happen, turnaround time is not tomorrow. It'll take us some time to transcribe to ensure that everything is available in simultaneous translation as well. So to close off for this evening, I want to thank everyone for submitting your questions and to continue to submit because we will continue to respond to those. They'll be posted, as I said, as well as the video to this evening's annual meeting. Thanks again to our expert panel for sharing their expertise, their time, and their insight. I want to thank everyone for joining us on our virtual annual meeting. At this time next year, the first council of our new era will be in place. So I hope you join us for that annual meeting. It should be interesting and learn a little more about their work as they take on their roles next year. So miigwech, good night, and bonne soirée.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.